What's up everyone, the Game 2K2 here once again, and over the next few videos we're going to be taking a look at the one and only video game franchise, Grand Theft Auto. Like all franchise reviews, we're going to be starting from the beginning, and the beginning for this franchise goes all the way back to 1997. Hard to believe that 14 years can seem so long ago. Despite popular belief, the first Grand Theft Auto was not made by Rockstar Games. In fact, the first 3 games were not made by Rockstar Games. They were actually made by a company named DMA Design, which after being sold twice has now become Rockstar North. Grand Theft Auto through Grand Theft Auto 2 would be some of the last games to be developed under the DMA label. The rest would be purely Rockstar. The first Grand Theft Auto game is revolved around completing missions and collecting points. The game will give you a destination and a task to do, and you have to complete that task to collect the points. You go around the cities in the game, which are known as Liberty City, Vice City, and San Andreas, and have to reach your destination. In order to do this, you drive around by stealing cars in the game. The gameplay was actually quite innovative for that time. While it's not the open world that we've all gotten used to in recent years, this was the first game where even though your destinations were already fixed and you can't select your missions, you can literally take any route that you want to get to your destination, and don't have to drive in a set pattern, which was awesome at the time. The game is not as weapon-based as you might expect. A good portion of the game just has you driving. The weapons still come into play, but not nearly as much as they would later on. And I might be wrong about this fact, but Grand Theft Auto is one of the first games I've seen that literally tries to recreate a lively city, with cars and people wandering around the streets. With past games, it was either one or the other, but never both. Like any game that tries to be innovative, innovation usually comes with flaws in the first go-around, and Grand Theft Auto is no exception to that tradition because the game does have its fair share of flaws. My first big problem is this camera angle. Grand Theft Auto has an overhead angle that I really can't stand because it makes it tough to turn because you can't see the turns until the last minute. And you can't tell what you can walk past or what things you might hit because the trees in the game look more like bushes. Another flaw is with the controls for the driving. The driving is very loose and tough to handle. Like I said before, the turning is difficult because of the camera angle, but it's also very sensitive with the controls. It almost seems like you're sliding on ice because one slight tap of the button and you will go in a completely different direction. For the PC version, you're controlling with the arrows on the keyboard, and the PS1 version uses the D-pad. The D-pad is a little more tolerable because the turns are easier to control, but the rest of the driving is still very loose. Also, this game has the worst save function ever. The game only saves when you're finished with the city, and I had to learn that little fact after I turned off the game, thinking that it would start me where I left off the next time I played. And the final flaw, and this is a flaw that really bugged me, and it's the arrow that points you in the direction that you need to go to get to your destination. And this might sound like a small problem, but it's not. This flaw is with the PC version only. The PC version's arrow is a small, see-through arrow that can't be seen if it's anywhere else other than the road. This made navigating around this game a pain because you can only see the arrow 10% of the time. Because once it leaves the road, you can only guess where the hell it's pointing. The PS1 fixed this problem. The arrow is slightly bigger and it's full yellow and not see-through. Graphically, the PC version is okay for this time period. This isn't the best looking PC game you'll find from 1997. The game just has an unbelievably flat look to it, and what really bugs me is the frame rate. The game is incredibly jumpy, and the animation with the cars just doesn't move very fluently. And I know people are going to argue that this was 1997, but the PS1 had games that ran better than Grand Theft Auto did. On that note, we move on to the PS1 version. The PS1 version is not too different in terms of visuals. The only noticeable difference is that the PC version has a great resolution to it, while the PS1 has that classic 32-bit resolution where it looks slightly blurred out, and it does make the smaller things tough to see, like the phone booths. However, to the PS1's credit, the frame rate was smoothed out and does run very well. However, this came with a price, and that price was the loading times. I don't think I've ever seen a game with so many loading screens. Now we move back to the controls. Besides the iffy driving controls, the rest of the controls are pretty good. I think the only issue that both the PC and PS1 controls have is a delayed response, which for this game means when you tap the button, your character will not immediately react. Your character is like a second off from the controls, which can be annoying at first, but it doesn't take long to get used to it. So overall, it's actually a really good game considering it's the first Grand Theft Auto. There are flaws, but I actually really enjoyed playing it despite those flaws. Now, everyone's natural thought is that it would go into Grand Theft Auto 2, but one game that most people keep forgetting about, including me, and is one of the reasons why this review is coming out a month later than I wanted it to, is because I forgot about Grand Theft Auto London. This was an expansion pack for the first Grand Theft Auto, and is to date the only Grand Theft Auto game to feature the actual name of the city and not a made-up name. The expansion pack had two games, Grand Theft Auto London 1969 and London 1961. 1969 was released for both the PC and PS1, while 1961 was PC only. There really isn't any need to go into detail about Grand Theft Auto London. It runs off the same engine as Grand Theft Auto, and the gameplay is 100% the same. However, to the game's credit, I love the little changes it makes with the environment to make it look like London, and make it look like the 1960s. The cars are different and the buildings are different for the most part as well. But everything else is pretty much the same, so overall, if you like the first Grand Theft Auto, then you'll like Grand Theft Auto London. Now we move on to Grand Theft Auto 2. Like Grand Theft Auto London, this game holds a strong resemblance to the first Grand Theft Auto. The game retains the overhead camera angle, and the overall look of the game is not too different. However, while the gameplay for the most part is the same, some changes have been made. There are now side missions like taxi driving, bus driving, and semi-truck driving. Taxi driving would actually be a recurring side mission for the rest of the franchise. I think the most clever aspect of the game is its location. The game takes place in Anywhere, USA. I always thought that was rather funny, and I'm stunned that Rockstar has not brought back that idea for later games. The free roam has also been improved. You have a little more free range, you can pretty much do whatever you want, and attack anything you want. The game also showed an improved want it level feature. While this feature did play a small role in the first game, it's a lot bigger here. If your want it level is high enough, you're facing just swarms of cops. I think the only problem is that the cops don't really do a good job on attacking you. A lot of times they just chase you. The city is a lot more lively with a great deal of things going on. Instead of just cars and people just driving and walking around, the people now do things to make the city more realistic. The biggest difference between Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2 is the graphical look. The game got a huge makeover in both detail and lighting. The city is much more detailed and is actually really cool to look at. The lighting is what really impressed me with the PC version because it looks so good. I think the only issue with the PC version is that it suffers from a frame rate issue when the screen starts to get loaded with more and more action when you're battling cops. This would also mark the one and only time that a Grand Theft Auto game would appear on a Sega console, and it would be ported for the Dreamcast. The Dreamcast version was the last version that I got because I got the PS1 and PC versions first, and it's every bit as good, if not better, than the PC version. The lighting looks slightly better and the game's frame rate ran smoother. The only thing that's a setback for the Dreamcast version is that it has a lot more loading times than the PC version. The PS1 version looks very much like the PC version of the first game. It's not nearly as detailed as the PC and Dreamcast versions of Grand Theft Auto 2, but it's a little better than the PS1 version of the first game. However, like the first game, the loading times are many and each take what seem like forever. That's a huge setback when you compare it to the other versions. One element of these games that I haven't brought up is the sound. Awesome sound for the PC version of Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2. You can hear people talking, the cars sound great, and the various little sounds like police sirens and telephones ringing is very cool too. The PS1 version of both games could get a bit choppy, but it still wasn't bad. The Dreamcast version of Grand Theft Auto 2 did actually sound better than the PC version. I don't know whether it's because TV speakers sound better than computer speakers, but I heard everything a lot better on the Dreamcast than the PC version. Then we have the controls. Obviously the PC and PS1 remain the same, so all I have to really analyze is the Dreamcast controls, and they go back and forth. The Dreamcast controller is not one of my favorites, period. The D-pad is way too close to the analog stick, and the controller is a bit big considering that it actually has less buttons than the PS1 controller. However, driving the cars on the Dreamcast controller is much easier than the PS1 version, and for one reason, and that's the fact that the Dreamcast controller has a regular D-pad, while the PS1 doesn't. I never understood Sony's decision to make the D-pad 4 separate buttons, and they've kept it that way for all their consoles. But that's really the only advantage that the Dreamcast has, because the rest is not quite as good as the other controllers. So overall, Grand Theft Auto 2 keeps the core gameplay, but adds and improves elements in the game to make it a much better game than its predecessor. Well everyone, thank you for listening. That's the first 3 Grand Theft Auto games. Tune in next time as we enter the PS2 and Xbox era with Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and San Andreas.